Ready to dive in? We're tackling Yuval Noah Harari's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century today, going deep with these original Spanish PDF excerpts. Really fascinating stuff.
It's true, Harari's work has generated a lot of buzz. Even folks like Barack Obama, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, they've all chimed in.
It's like he's tapped into something, right? One thing that struck me was this idea, the old ways we make sense of the world, those big, grand narratives, they're sputtering. Like liberalism, for example. It's as if they can't quite keep up with how fast things are changing.
A crisis of relevance, almost.
Mhm.
You could say that. Harari uses Brexit and even, well, someone like Donald Trump as examples. You'd say it wasn't just economics or politics at play, but something deeper. People felt left out, like those narratives didn't speak to them anymore. It's that emotional disconnect that's really unsettling.
It's a powerful image she uses, too. Imagine a grand old theater, but the play's lost its punch. Actors seem out of touch. People aren't just going to sit there quietly. Some might demand a new show. Others might rush the stage. That's the kind of energy we're seeing now, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And on top of this, there's automation looming. I mean, sure, we've all heard the robots taking jobs worries, but Harari says this time it feels different.
Not just factory floors anymore, huh?
Exactly. Now it's artificial intelligence, not just physical stuff, but thinking, too. Imagine self-driving cars replacing taxis, algorithms diagnosing illnesses better than doctors even, changes the whole game.
Okay, put yourself in these shoes. You're a radiologist, years of training, suddenly there's an AI reading scans faster, more accurately. How does that make you feel? What happens to your purpose, your place?
It's way beyond just the money, right to the core of who we are. Harari suggests this could even lead to a new useless class, people who feel lost. Not just their jobs, but emotionally, mentally. Adrift.
Almost like being set adrift, your skills, your purpose, none of it holds water anymore. He even links this to, the anxiety, the depression we're seeing everywhere. Like our minds are struggling to adapt to how fast things change.
And here's where it gets interesting. Despite all this anxiety about the future, Harari is also really big on the power of stories, even made-up ones.
Hold on, stories, how does that fit in?
He's talking about narratives, right? Harari argues we're hardwired to find meaning in them, believe them even. Doesn't even matter if they're literally true. Think about nationalism, religion, even just like being loyal to a brand. These are all narratives that get people to do extraordinary things.
Like we're always searching for a script, some framework to make sense of it all. And that search often leads us to, latch onto stories that resonate with us, our fears, desires, the whole shebang.
And those stories, they can be incredibly unifying. Even if, from the outside, the beliefs seem, kind of irrational. The soldier who risks everything for their country, the activist dedicating their life to a cause, often it's deep belief rooted in a powerful story.
So if we're wired for these narratives, if they hold so much sway, doesn't that also make us vulnerable? Especially now when information, true or not, spreads like wildfire.
That's the million-dollar question. And Harari wrestles with it big time. It's the potential for manipulation, for bad information to take hold, especially if it confirms what we already lean towards believing.
Primed to believe, even if it's not good for us.
And that's where Harari's warning about ignorance comes in.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit.
He says, in this world drowning in information so complex, it's tempting to grab onto any answer that seems simple, even if it's, incomplete, misleading, flat out wrong.
Like our brains are wired to see patterns, even when they're not really there.
Exactly. And that, combined with those echo chambers online, makes us easy targets for confirmation bias. We seek out stuff that backs up what we already believe, even if it's flawed. Harari uses a stark example to make this point. The Holocaust.
Whoa, okay. Big jump there. How does that fit in?
He'd say, even with good intentions, being ignorant, especially when you blindly buy into a messed up ideology, it can have terrifying consequences. It wasn't just pure hatred that fueled the Holocaust. It was a systemic failure to question, to really examine the narrative being pushed.
Chilling stuff. Makes you wonder, with AI and all, are we just sleepwalking into new kinds of ignorance? Even with more information than ever before?
A real worry. Think about it. How often do we just trust whatever algorithms, search engines, social media feeds tell us? Harari suggests we're basically outsourcing our critical thinking, handing over the ability to tell truth from lies to these digital, gatekeepers. He even warns about digital dictatorships.
Hold on, digital dictatorships. Now you have my full attention. What does that even look like?
He points to China, how they use technology to control information on a massive scale. Surveillance, censorship, it's all there. They create a reality where certain stories get amplified, others just silence.
Like something straight out of dystopian sci-fi, but it's actually happening.
And it highlights this huge challenge we're facing. How do we even tell what's true anymore? In a world flushed with information where tech can even mess with how we perceive things, it's not as easy as just, fact-checking something.
So it's not just the stories themselves, but who's controlling them, the platforms, the whole information ecosystem, recognizing the power dynamics at play, right?
Exactly. And it demands that we're more discerning, critical, aware of our own biases and what might be shaping how we see things. Funny you mentioned sci-fi, because Harari actually critiques how much we rely on it to understand the future.
Really? I figured he'd be all about that future-focused stuff.
He said, sure, sci-fi can be a powerful tool for exploring what might be, but it can also box us in. He talks about films like The Matrix, for example. They present this very black and white view of reality, real versus fake.
That classic red pill, blue pill thing. Either you face the ugly truth or you live in blissful ignorance.
Right. But Harari says reality, way messier than that. These simple narratives, even if they're supposed to make you think, they can actually make it harder to deal with the real world's complexities. A kind of escape, a way to distance ourselves from the messiness of now.
So if the old stories are failing, and even sci-fi might be leading us astray, where do we even begin looking for answers? It's like we're sailing without a map or compass.
Harari doesn't pretend to have all the answers. In fact, he's clear that there's no magic solution, no one-size-fits-all. But he does offer a few key insights to help us navigate.
Lay it on me. I'm lost at sea here.
One of his big arguments. We can't predict the future perfectly, but we got to accept that change is coming. Instead of clinging to old stories or getting lost in doom and gloom scenarios, we got to cultivate adaptability. Lifelong learning, that's key.
So not about resisting change, but becoming okay with not knowing what's next. Easier said than done when everything feels so shaky, right?
For sure. But he's not saying we should just give in to chaos. It's about recognizing that what we know how to do today might be useless tomorrow. We need to constantly be learning, seeking out new angles, adapting to tech and new ways of thinking.
Like we're all back in school, but this time the curriculum is always changing.
Exactly. And it's not just about, surviving economically as things get automated. It's about staying fulfilled in a world where work itself is changing. Harari suggests we find ways to enjoy the learning itself, cultivate curiosity about the world.
Embracing the unknown, even if it's a bit scary. Finding the joy in the journey, not just the destination.
Precisely. And this ties back to his point about stories. We have to be pickier about the narratives we buy into. Make sure they're serving us, not the other way around.
So not just passively consuming stories anymore, but actively shaping our own.
Exactly. It's about recognizing we have agency. We can influence our lives and the world. And this leads to another crucial point Harari makes. A new kind of inequality is brewing.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. We've talked about money, but what other forms could it take?
He's talking about biotechnology, AI, those fields. He says we might see a future where it's not just about being richer or poorer, it's about our biology itself.
Like, the wealthy could literally buy themselves better bodies, sharper minds, longer lives even. Feels like we're already wading into sci-fi territory.
Sounds wild, right?
Yes.
But you can kind of see the early signs already. Healthcare costs are insane, genetic testing and treatments are super exclusive. Now picture that magnified by tech that could actually rewrite what our bodies and minds can do.
Not just having more stuff then, but being more than someone else on a fundamental level. That's a whole different ballgame of inequality.
Exactly. And it makes you ask some big questions. What does it even mean to be human if that happens? What about fairness?
Yeah.
Opportunity, especially in a world increasingly shaped by this tech.
It's a lot to process. But even with all these potential downsides, Harari doesn't leave us totally in the dumps. He offers a few things that might help us deal with all this.
One of the most interesting things he talks about is meditation. Mindfulness, too. Not saying we all need to become monks or anything, but he thinks these practices can build resilience, help us see things more clearly in this crazy world.
So not just thinking critically about the world, but training our minds to handle it emotionally.
Right. He's saying in this world of constant information, change, uncertainty, knowing how to stay grounded, manage that anxiety, that becomes crucial. Like building an inner strength so we're not so easily knocked off course.
Makes sense. Non-stop news, notifications, things to worry about. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, lose sight of what matters.
And that's where mindfulness comes in. Learning to just observe our thoughts and feelings without judging them. Finding a way to be present, aware, even in the middle of chaos.
Calm in the storm. Sounds almost paradoxical, but it fits, doesn't it?
We've been focusing on the tough stuff, the risks of this century. But Harari is also really big on the opportunities this time holds.
Absolutely. He says this time of rapid change, as unsettling as it can be, it's also a chance to redefine what it means to be human. We can change our relationship with technology, prioritize well-being, create a future that's fairer, more sustainable.
So not just surviving the 21st century, but actually thriving in it. Exactly. And that means embracing the unknown, being open to new ways of thinking, new ways of being. He says we need to move past those narratives of fear, of scarcity, embrace a bigger, more optimistic view of what's possible.
It's a call to action, isn't it? Not just watching the future happen, but helping create it. Throughout this whole deep dive into 21 lessons, one thing's been really clear. We have power, as individuals, as a society, to shape how the century unfolds.
It's like he's reminding us we're not just along for the ride. We're not powerless against these forces. We have choices. And those choices affect our lives, the world around us.
It's both empowering and, well, a bit daunting. Makes you realize the responsibility that comes with that power.
For sure. And it shows us how important it is to stay informed, engaged, to be active in creating the kind of future we want to see. Harari doesn't give us all the answers, but he gives us the tools to ask the right questions, challenge our assumptions, and face the future with both, wisdom and a sense of wonder.
As we wrap up this deep dive, one question's really sticking with me, maybe for our listeners too. If, like Harari says, our identities, our very biology even, could be reshaped by tech in the coming decades, what will it even mean to be human in, say, 50, 60 years? That's something to think about as we navigate this incredible time in history.